My dear ladies, the virtue to be practiced for the month of November is peace of soul. And St. Francis de Sales, in his work, The Introduction to the Devout Life, explains how necessary this virtue is. He says that after sin, anxiety is the greatest evil because it destroys peace of soul and keeps us from loving God as we ought. Another famous spiritual writer, Dom Lorenzo Scapoli, has written an excellent little work on this subject, peace of soul. And I would like to summarize the main points of this work for you to consider this month. First, Dom Scapoli says, to attain peace of soul, we must relinquish human consolation. That is, we must learn to seek consolation in God alone. Very often when we have some cross to endure, our natural reaction is to complain about it to family or friends. We want them to know what we have to suffer because we want their pity. But this does not restore our peace of soul in the midst of suffering. In fact, it will only make our anxiety worse if we don't find the comfort that we are seeking. Rather, Dom Scapoli says, we must unite our sufferings with those of Christ. Offer them to him and ask him for the grace to bear patiently what you have to suffer. And if you do this, he will become the consolation that you seek. The second step to acquiring peace of soul is to remain unattached to worldly things. God in his goodness has given us many good things, our bodily health, the necessities of life, and even comforts to one degree or another. But if we become attached to these things, if we see them as belonging to us by right, rather than the free gifts of God that they are, they will destroy our peace of soul because we will fear to lose them. Of course, it's not wrong to take a reasonable care of our health or to take a reasonable care of the material goods that God has entrusted to us. But we have to remember that God has given us these things and he can take them away if he sees that it would be to our spiritual advantage. We will preserve our peace of soul if we remember that God knows our needs and will provide what is necessary for us. The third thing we must do to attain peace of soul is we must submit our will to the will of God. God's will manifests itself in 1,000 different ways to us each and every day. Circumstances that arise outside our control, they come about by his will and permission. It could be a sick child or the car that won't start, a headache, anything at all. These things can make us angry or sad or impatient because they go against what we want. But when we see them as coming from God and we unite our will to his, they become a source of peace and joy. No one can avoid troubles and inconveniences in this life. All men have their crosses to carry. But those who refuse to accept these things as God's will, they do not have an easier time bearing them. Rather, they have a harder time. Dom Scapoli writes, their lives are spent in weariness and toil, as one who labors fruitlessly through the years. Never do they obtain that true repose and interior peace in which the Lord dwells. And finally, to obtain peace of soul, we must not become discouraged at the obstacles which present themselves. Sometimes we may be dejected at the sight of our faults. Sometimes we may find it difficult to pray, or we may be disturbed at the temptations which befall us. But we cannot let these things discourage us or move us to give up the practice of virtue. We should continue to be confident in the power of God's grace. He wants us to trust Him. He wants us to be happy. And He wants us to be at peace. And so if you put these steps into practice, seeking consolation in God alone, detaching yourself from worldly things, accepting God's will at every moment, and never becoming discouraged, if you do these things, you will attain that peace of soul that God wants for you. It's that peace which the world cannot give, which comes from loving God and knowing that we are loved by Him. God bless you.